Welcome to all of you joining us on LinkedIn today. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us about this important topic. My name is Mark Bunn, and I lead the SaaS business for Nokia Cloud and Network Services. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Karl Whitelock of IDC, the VP of IDC. Karl, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes. Mark, thanks for having me here. My name's Karl Whitelock. I lead the operations and monetization global practice. That's our fancy names for the former OSS and BSS. And I'm here with IDC, and I'm delighted to be here. And they told us we could just have free reign on all of the deep, dark secrets and questions about SaaS, and particularly about SaaS for the communications industry. So, I've got this burning question. I'm sure a lot of our audience has this same question. What the heck is this, Mark? Please help me here.
All right, so first let's break down the acronym SaaS, S-A-A-S. It stands for Software as a Service. And software as a service, by definition, is a service. It's typically thought of as an application or a product, but when it's provided as a service, then we just refer to it in our vernacular as a service. It delivers a business outcome. Now, all applications are supposed to deliver a business outcome, but the most important point here is from the perspective of the consumer of the service, that they are getting some kind of meaningful value. Questions that we typically get asked in our industry, like what cloud are you running on, aren't quite as important as how reliable is this service that you're providing me. So you have to think about the business outcomes from the consumer perspective. It's often offered as a subscription, so we're pretty familiar with that in our industry. Doesn't have to be solely or exclusively a subscription. There could be some utilization, usage components to it. Certainly needs to be underpinned by technology that is contemporary cloud-native technology. That's how we are able to scale the service itself, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in the course of our discussion. In the ideal state, in the mature state, it's offered as a fully digitalized business experience. You can think in terms of a digitalized channel where someone could navigate and even order the service based on, a trial that they've spun up just by, on demand, and then eventually chose, yes, I want to use that service. And probably most important is the service life cycle. The software, the product service is managed on behalf of the consumer of the service by the one providing the service, the full life cycle. So things like patching, upgrades, that just happens automatically from the perspective of the consumer. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think the other aspect of this question is why if I'm a service provider, communications service provider, why is this so important for me right now?
Yeah.
Why should I be interested in this?
Yeah.
I'm sure that we're going to talk about it in a lot of detail, but can you give us a high level kind of why is this so important right now?
Yeah, I can. I actually think this has been important for some time. It's really started with the whole network functions virtualization movement, which started down the path of separating, disaggregating the hardware and the software, and that made the software much more manageable from the point of view of operations and automating the operations, as well as scaling the applications themselves. And then that naturally kind of evolved into cloud nativeness, and cloud nativeness at a high level was about breaking down the monoliths in our applications, separating them into terms we like to use, like microservices that have their own independent life cycles, can be managed independently. And again, that improved the automation of the application, the service itself. And then to me, and cloud adoption has obviously factored in here, but to me, the next logical step is to get to true software as a service, where the full life cycle of that product or that service is managed by software. So in its most mature state, Karl, software as a service is about software that is delivered but managed by software, and that software that's managing it is automation software, and that is built by humans, of course, but it is a little different from the way we tend to think about as a service today, which is about software and hardware that's managed by people.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So it does, and so let me play back something that I think you said here that's important in my mind, and that is that the network is becoming cloudified or virtualized, and we've got these virtualized the VNFs and the CNFs now that's coming about. That's what you meant by coming from the NFV world, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we're not there yet, right? We still got a ways to go from the network side of things.
For sure.
But then let's talk about all of the operations aspects of this. Is that where things are really still in an infancy state?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about software as a service, in general, it's a mainstream idea, depending on what industry you're talking about.
Okay.
Certainly not our industry. In our industry, I'd like to characterize it as still relatively nascent. But I think there are some areas where software as a service is acceptable, if not even in demand. One area that we've seen over the last few years of transformation is in this whole CX, what we sometimes in our vernacular terminology we call the BSS layer,
Right.
but that CX order to cash process, well, that's been moving to a software as a service or software on demand model for some time now.
Right.
And I think what's going to follow suit is billing. Makes sense. I think there are other types of applications, though, that are adjacent to those order to cash systems, like analytics, that I think would be prime examples of something that could be provided and consumed as software as a service today. Security management, security assurance, I think those would be good examples of something that would be applicable for the CSP need and something acceptable for the CSPs to consume on demand. Network management. As you get further down the stack, closer to the network, maybe there's a little bit of discomfort still on accepting as true software as a service, this on-demand capability, but the technology exists to be able to provide it. Right?
Yeah, and I follow that a lot. I think there's a lot of folks that are still trying to understand the difference between what SaaS is used for, let's say in the general enterprise space, or in that customer retail side of things. I think it's one thing to have your CPQ or order management, or like you were saying earlier, billing. I think those, because there's so much touch to the customer, you want to be able to do things quickly, make adjustments, do things quickly again, see where things fit. In fact, I can give you an example in the retail sector, one I'm familiar with a few years ago. So we're talking several years ago in the retail sector. There was this competitive process going on between two large retailers, and it was in the clothing world of all things. Yep. And one came out with a super way to attract customers. By the end of the day, their competitor had caught up. That's how fast things change in that world. But now you take and apply that same logic down into the communications infrastructure stack, if you want to call it. And there are certain things, like you said, that can be done at the top layer and the sides, and as we kind of drill down into the network. But I think we ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's this vision that's where we've got to get. We've got to get it all there, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we can go a step at a time. Ultimately, I liked your example, right? And if you think about what is also going on, the inflection point that we're in our industry right now, 5G, and the adoption of some additional or some porting capabilities around AI and ML, the real need right now is about time to value. Yep. While we still consider the importance of TCO. And see, this is where I think software as a service really fits in. You think about 5G, so the key to 5G is reduced higher speeds, EMBB, and reduced latency rates, and machine type communication or machine to machine communication. That's really about automation. Well, I think software provided as a service, as we talked about before, as really on demand, fits right into that model. And so it starts to drive this or feed this need that the CSPs are going to continue to have, and it's going to continue to increase, to improve their time to value, right? Time to market and time to value for the services they consume, as well as reduce their TCO, which is implied, I believe, when you start to bring software online and it is self-managing.
Yeah, so you brought up a couple of really great points. One of the things I want to kind of reflect on and kind of paint a little picture here and then get your opinions with, deals with the whole concept of 5G. You know, we've heard these comments that, you know, if 5G is not another G, 5G is changing the way people do business. But really, what's so different about 5G? And I think part of it is the distributed architecture that 5G brings to light.
Yeah.
Okay, and then with that architecture, that creates a different way to look at doing business. And I think we've got a lot of expectations now from not only consumers with wanting faster speeds and, you know, the normal stuff from you would expect, but also from now enterprises who are looking at wanting to incorporate, can I say, connectivity as part of a solution to an end-to-end business need this way, whatever way it may be. So the force here is that we're moving to a real-time environment for all parts of the operations environment. We're moving to some level of dynamic capability. Those are two very big factors that the existing systems and processes were never designed to handle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Right. And you picked up on a couple of points. The distributed nature of the connectivity, especially when you consider, you know, the what 5G is trying to achieve. Fortunately, when it comes to the software delivery, the cloud vendors, the hyperscalers, they've been helping out quite a bit here. Each of them has really started to establish what their what they call the edge strategies are, but it's really about how they get compute power closer to the point of consumption, which is absolutely what we need. And then you also picked up on the solution aspect. I think we should explore that a little bit more, but when I was referring earlier to areas where I think CSPs could adopt SaaS and start to expand into their adoption of SaaS and benefit from that, you know, I was really thinking about, you know, point solutions, you know, analytic solutions, security solutions, order to cash. Maybe that's a bigger solution set, but it's still point solutions. I think you're onto something if you're suggesting that, look, in order to provide real value here, we need to be able to bring together these point solutions and create some synergy in bringing together those capabilities.
Yeah. Well, I think as an industry, we've always operated in sort of a point solution mode, right?
Yeah.
It's always been about configuring, provisioning, and activating the service. Then we start to monitor the service. We kind of forget about it. Oh yeah, we tell billing somewhere in there. Yeah. Sometimes we don't tell billing.
Different people, different groups.
Yeah, you know, and there it is. You know, the service was up, it was operational, we left it alone.
Right.
And we monitored it to make sure the components stayed operational and fit into a certain level of acceptability.
That's right.
But I think what's happening in 5G, that there's a lot of change that's happened. It's, first of all, a lot more software now, less boxes that are performing special functions. So that's a big piece. But also, now that everything is in this software state, you have to be worried about, you know, performance.
Yes.
You have to worry about end-to-end. End-to-end. It's not just what's going on in the network. It's the end-to-end service now, right?
That's
so
right.
That's the orchestration side of things is a big piece. And then you kind of just keep breaking it down. It's the assurance aspect. Well, I've got to assure, but I have to make sure that once something starts to go wrong, I can then create something new again to keep things in compliance. So it's these cycles. It's not just, this is where automation has a big role, right?
That's right.
You can't do this as humans.
Yeah, and somewhat ironic is going back to the comments earlier about NFV and our transition through cloud native. That whole movement was really about, rightfully so, was about not only disaggregating applications from the hardware, it was about breaking up monoliths. Right, so the software would come to you in a package. You referred to OSS. It would be an OSS package, or maybe it's even a service fulfillment and assurance package, kind of, you know, cobbled together. But they were still monolithic. Made it very hard to manage the application.
Yeah.
Certainly couldn't automate the application lifecycle. The irony, though, is where we need to take software and these capabilities is we need to bring the capabilities together. So you almost need monolithic capabilities that can be managed at a very granular level to be able to provide the real-time kind of operations and management that we need. But certainly, in order to provide value, to true value in the world of 5G and where it's headed, we have to have all of that capability working together and automated. And so these packages that have been historically separated, OSS, BSS, they have to at least behave in a seamless way.
Well, I think it's interesting how you bring that together, because I fully agree with that. It's an end to end. It's in this dynamic cycle. Yeah. I have to monitor the service because I've got SLA parameters. If I'm going to sell services that are differentiated based on some level of capability from the network, I need to be constantly monitoring, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's that aspect, and when things don't work right, and sometimes that happens, right? Even in the best of networks, then you've got to be able to establish a new pathway or create a new service definition, tear down the old one, and do this all in a continuous cycle. Again, the monolithic systems that you were talking about, and the fact that humans were involved in many of these process loops, you can't do it. Yeah. And then advance forward. I'll shut up here in a minute because I want to get your thought. But there's a lot more to come in the 5G world, because we're changing the way we do business, but the technology lets us change.
Yeah, it does. You touched on something there I think is really important: reliability.
Yeah.
And there's been every once in a while you see this report about a cloud going down and services going offline, and that's for a CSP, for a communication service provider, that would be a non-negotiable item, right?
That reminds me. I got to interrupt here because I was doing a presentation just a few weeks ago, and my productivity software wanted to do a massive update on my machine in the middle of the presentation. That is not reliability from a telco perspective. Right?
Been there.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to say there. Obviously there's some work to be done. You would hope that your hyperscale platforms don't go down, but they're, today they usually advertise about 3 nines the way we think about it. There are solution architectures, though, that you can put in place, ways to use the technology that even the hyperscalers provide to put in place a high availability and geo-redundant system, so that if you do fail in one area or fail in one region, you can fail over. And that's going to be, I think, a norm for us in our industry. It's going to be something that we're going to have to do. And then you mentioned the tools and the tools themselves, the ones that today manage our cloud-native environments, they've become very sophisticated, Karl.
Yep.
You can say, for an existing microservice, how many replicas you want running at one time, and if one fails, the system knows to bring that, another one up online. And so there's a lot of technology that's available today that makes the ability to offer, sophisticated, absolutely essential services on the cloud, and do it with a high degree of reliability.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit, I am not a technical geek when it comes to like coding and stuff, especially in today's vernacular. Yeah. I won't tell you the computer language that I was most familiar with. I mean, that would really date
COBOL, me. Fortran?
Something around the Fortran days. Yeah, absolutely. But the interesting thing here is that when I have what's happening today, this reliability thing just never seems to want to go away. In fact, it becomes more and more important.
Right. Yeah, it does. It does. And I'm not here to suggest we've solved the problem. We've cracked the nut. I'm just here to say that as we get more sophisticated in our offerings for software as a service, and as the demand increases, and as we move into more into driving the use cases, the types of use cases that 5G had predicted we would drive, we have to solve it, right? Yeah. And there are ways today with today's technology to address and to provide high levels of reliability. Yeah. It shouldn't be something that prevents us from moving forward in this paradigm that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think the big thing here is, look, we know we've got to make changes. We've got to do it fast. We cannot take 2 or 3 years to develop an architecture and then all the applications and how they interact with the network, now cloudified network functions. That is not a strategy that's workable in today's business environment. I think of, again, back in the coding world, if you think about, there's probably, this much effort that goes into the functionality definition part. And there's usually that much, a bigger chunk that goes into the database management, the infrastructure architecture, and all of the things that need to support that in a secure and reliable, extendable sort of manner. So, this sets up the reason for SaaS really, really well, because now you're letting experts who do this all the time, just that infrastructure part, let them deal with those, and then let the developers that need to do the functionality focus on just functionality. Now, that's my simplistic reasoning for why this works.
Awesome, and it's very, very observant. You're right. I mean, the value of cloud in general and SaaS specifically is that you're offloading, as a consumer of the service, you're offloading a lot of that heavy lifting to the provider of the service. Really, all you have the responsibility for is a certain level of security. That's setting up your access control, but even things like network threat prevention, the application itself or the service itself, its ability to, or its security levels, operational security, both physical and the operations of the services themselves, that all is offloaded, right? So it makes it, it takes that onus off of the one that is consuming the service. Now, you went a step further and talked about the developers, right? And I do see a couple of different scenarios when it comes to software as a service. One is a company that just wants to consume the services as a means to an end. I'm an MVNO. I'm starting up an MVNO.
Right.
I don't have time to go purchase software, hardware,
let alone develop
deploy
it.
I just want to consume it, and I want to consume it holistically. And I think that that's going to maybe be an initial driver in our industry for software as a service. But an alternative would be a scenario where a company, a CSP, has, they do have an IT department, and they do see themselves as being able to provide more value to their customers by building something, consuming piece parts of software that's offered by different vendors, and presumably, or at least hopefully, offered as software as a service. So then they're focused on just the development part, as you referred to it, and not all the setup that has to be required to get to the point where they can start building these value chains for their industry.
I think that's spot on. And in fact, speaking on the value chain, I'm familiar with a couple of examples where, again, I think, this is setting up the need for SaaS. And it's mostly from the aspect of that dynamic and real-time environment. So bear with me, audience, for just a minute. I want to set this up for you here. But I'm familiar with one of the large 5G wireless operators today who's been working with one of the hyperscalers. So the hyperscaler brings to the telecom edge, if we want to call it something, things like compute capacity and data storage, and a level of AI that can be applied to a lot of different things. Okay, and then the telco brings the connectivity of that 5G network also right to that edge. This is what we call multi-access edge computing, or MEC for short. In this environment, then, you've got a third-party developer who's out trying to address business challenges with a lot of different industries. So perhaps in the healthcare industry, a diagnostics situation, and not that remote surgery stuff. We'll get there someday. But it's the diagnostics, being able to transport large amounts of data back and forth across that network, and then using the hyperscalers' analytics to really determine a probability of, should it be this result, should it be that result. If we look at it another way, in sports, we're starting to see a lot more of real-time statistics becoming available. Again, it's the same thing. A lot of data is going across that network.
That's right.
And we're doing a lot of analysis right at the edge.
That's right.
Okay, and we could just go on and on. But the point here is you've got to put your applications that control this stuff right at the edge too. So that might be a billing function, it might be a provisioning function, and certainly an assurance function.
That's right.
Okay, so you can't do this with purpose-built stuff the way we've been doing it. No. This is setting up again for why a SaaS application might be a good alternative.
Back to time to value. And I think you're touching on something really important, great example of an ecosystem, right? For a very specific use case. And in that ecosystem, you may have a vendor, an additional vendor on top of the CSP and the cloud provider. Could be a whole host of vendors that are providing capabilities here. And ideally, they're providing software that can be just consumed and could be consumed through like an open API layer. Then you could construct, essentially an end-to-end solution that would be valuable for your medical, scenario.
Yeah, that enterprise developer is delivering something that either works or doesn't work to that end customer, that like you say, the doctor's office, the hospital, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what's key there is one that, it is software that's available on demand. Right, not something that takes long lead times to set up. That it has an open API layer. Essentially, it can, it's a well understood way to consume that service. And it has to have some level of extensibility, some way of expanding on the capability. So you're not just integrating pieces, but you're also adding value as a developer in your scenario, adding value to that, complex capability that has just been developed. And so that is something that historically in software as a service, software as a service just hasn't been strong in the area of extensibility, right? But that is an area where I've been focused quite a bit on how do we continue to expand on the value that software as a service can bring, so that you're not back in the world of customization. We don't want to go there, but certainly in the area, the realm of configuration and some extensibility that makes sense for your particular application, tailoring, if you will.
Yeah. We always hear the thing about 5G is saying we need to do business different. Everybody understands that, but everybody has their own idea of what that means. And I think the other aspect here is when we say doing business different, the communications provider, CSP, instead of being the complete only deliverer of something of value, now it's a piece of a larger puzzle, right?
That's right. So
how does SaaS work to help in that regard?
Yeah, and I would come back to your scenario. I liked your example. SaaS is an enabler, right? It is something that, if done correctly, then it's just a capability. It's a piece of software. It's an application that is available on demand. Ideally, can be extensible, so it's tailored. But essentially, it does, as advertised, does what it's supposed to do, and it does it in a reliable and secure way, right? And so, from the perspective of the CSP, all they have to do is essentially use that as a foundational element. In some ways, it's a microservice from their perspective as a building block to build their solution, right? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, if you think about it, where we are today as an industry, most operators still have these monolithic systems.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of still manual processes, or at least pieces of the processes that are manual. And we know that the vision is out here where this has all got to be automated, simply because there's too many things going on to have humans in the loop. We can't do it.
Right.
But also, it's not a cost effective. And now you've got to have this distributed functionality in a lot of places. So it's just another reason why the business model's got to look a lot different.
Yeah, here. And it crawl, walk, run. So you've characterized it well. We are at a certain place in our industry right now but we've already started well down the road. And that's why I think it's useful to come back to NFV. I know some might say it's old news, but it was a key stepping stone, right, for us, and the move into cloud native. Most applications today have some degree of cloud nativeness to them. We're already relying on the hyperscaler clouds. They're only going to get better, and they're going to be pushed out to the edge, as you've said. So the opportunity is just continuing to grow. And now if we add in software as a service, software that is available on demand, consumed on demand as the enabler of a company's business or a piece of the puzzle that they might want to assemble, then I think we've solved the problem, right?
Yeah.
But that's crawl, walk, run. So let's start where it makes the most sense.
I want to just jump on that piece of the puzzle idea. Mm-hmm. I know we've been talking at length here about a lot of different things, but I think they're related if you sit back and think about this. The fact that if the operator truly is now performing a piece of a bigger solution, then this idea of ecosystems becomes greater and greater. I think that as an industry, we have really not spent very much time around ecosystem management. Yet I think it's one of those that a lot of enterprises have got this figured out.
That's
Certainly
right.
the hyperscalers have got it figured out.
Yes.
And we've got to make it easy for the end user customer to be able to pick and choose from a platform type of approach to move forward. Now that's, again, my simplistic view. What do you think?
I like the simplistic view. We need to keep simplicity in mind. I think sometimes we run the risk in our industry of over-engineering.
Yeah.
And so let's keep the end goal in mind, which is simplicity. Certainly it's going to take some time to get to where we want to go. And there's going to be complications along the way, but I think the technology is there. We have vendors that are providing this capability that's going to support our CSP customers. So let's take the journey together.
Yeah, I completely get it. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I know you're representing Nokia.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you've been wondering what these flashy lights are, that's a Nokia network back there. It's 5G. It's working, Yes. But does Nokia have this problem solved?
Problem solved. I'd love to say that we have this problem solved. It's a complex problem, but we have certainly started down this path.
Yeah.
And so, as I suggested before, I think there are some application areas in the IT stack that make a lot of sense for CSPs to start getting familiar with, software as a service. The ones that are top of mind for me are the CX order to cash layer, but also security applications, security assurance applications, your network management applications, your analytics applications, and that will include AI and ML. Those we should be absolutely driving forward and adopting a software as a service mindset. We also at Nokia are thinking longer term in building those value chains that we talked about earlier, Karl. So we're thinking about the network and how the network moves to SaaS in part or in whole, as well as how do you create extensibility from our network and network services by enabling these value chains. In our terminology, we call them service chains or distributed service chains, so that someone or some company or some third party can construct their own value, build their own value using SaaS as their foundational component.
Yeah, but the bottom line is no one's got it all, right?
No.
And so there is this great need for cooperation in the industry as a whole.
Correct.
So let's kind of wrap things up here and just kind of I want to ask one last question, and perhaps in our conversation here, we've convinced some organizations that they really need to explore the SaaS idea more thoroughly and really start to make some headway. Because I do think, everything I've seen in the industry, I do think this is the pathway we've got to go if we're going to be serious about launching 5G anything.
Yes.
At scale, let's put it that way. So as a communication service provider, where do I start? I know you've said some things already, but just once more, tell me where I need to start the most or focus the most, and then what's my pathway to finally getting it all together.
Yeah. First of all, I think most of the CSPs I've spoken to, they're already thinking about cloud native software, right?
Of course, yes.
They're certainly thinking about cloud, and there are various opinions on cloud. But that is really the place to start. Those are underpinnings to what we've been talking about here today. As far as the capabilities that they should be looking at, we have some at Nokia that we'd be happy to talk to our customers about. And so, just call me. But I think that's a good place to close, Karl, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for really engaging conversation. It's been fun, and it's been my privilege and pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me. It's not very often that you get a chance to kind of just dialogue and interact about something so important and something that's going to absolutely change the whole industry.
Yeah.
And so I'm thrilled to be a part of where we're at in this industry, and I'm excited to see where things are going to progress over, let's say, next 12 months. Maybe we do another one of these conversations sometime in the future. I'm hoping to see a lot more progress than we are at this point in time.
Yeah, me as well. So we'll end here. Thank you all for attending this session. It's a very important discussion topic, and love for you to stay online for questions and some online discussion.